I felt 3 very intense pushes. And she was like, that's really good. Worst case scenario, if he starts crowning, we need to pull over. And I could feel myself tearing. I was tearing up. And I was like, I can't do it. I would literally sit here for the rest of eternity before I'd push here. Hey everyone, welcome back to today's episode of the Hyla Home. Here we talk about motherhood, natural living, and homemaking, which includes renovating our 1940s home. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my birth story of my son. And the reason is I just had a friend over and got done sharing with her my birth story. And I thought to myself, you know what, while it's fresh in my memory, while I just went through saying it, I need to share it with you all before I forget. Also because I want to document it for myself so that I don't forget any of the details. My son is now 3 months old and I really love this story and it's definitely something I don't want to forget. So without further ado, we are going to get started, and just in line with what we'll be talking about today, my son is here with me. He's in his little swing, which you can probably hear in the background, and we have some white noise going, which you probably also can hear if that's not super annoying. With that, we'll get started. So starting back before I was even pregnant, my husband and I decided that we wanted to have our children pretty close together. My husband's siblings were all about 2 years apart. Me and my brothers were about 2 years apart also. And so we knew that we wanted our kids pretty close together. I had also been told by my provider that breastfeeding would help me not have my cycle again. Now I know there's a huge controversy in that you can get pregnant while you're breastfeeding. The thing is you ovulate before you have your period. So you don't actually really know. So breastfeeding can help you not get your period, but the thing is once you have it for the first time, you're not going to know your cycle started back up. So you can get pregnant without even knowing it. So we talked to my provider and we said, we want a second baby pretty much as soon as is healthy. And she recommended waiting 9 months. On the converse side of it, she also recommended us not doing anything about it because she said, you're not going to get pregnant before 9 months. So obviously that didn't happen since our children are 13 months apart, but it was all close enough to within plan that obviously everything's cool. So fast forward, pregnant. As I'm going through all of my appointments with all my midwives leading up to my appointment, everyone is telling me you are not going to hit your due date. Our due date was in December and we were coming up on it. I was going to appointments every week, and as they were checking me, they were saying there is absolutely no way you're going to meet your due date. Now with my daughter, I actually ended up having her the day after her due date. I went into labor on her due date. So I really kind of just expected the same thing to happen, even though everyone was around me was saying you're going to go into labor before then. Well, since it was around Christmas, we wanted to get all of our Christmas things out of the way, including family parties, get-togethers, all of that sort of thing. So the night before I had my son, the night before, we went over to my aunt's house and had a huge Christmas cousin get-together thing and had no idea I was going to go into labor the next year. Going back, right as we're leading up to my appointment, and everyone's telling me, you're going to have him before your due date. You're going to have him before your due date. I met a midwife who was feeling my belly, and I asked her what position he was in. Now, he was head down, but he was sideways in my uterus, and she said, you're going to have a whole lot of pre-labor, so just expect that. And I had had quite a bit of pre-labor with my first, so I just expected the same sort of thing to happen. Well, a week and 2 days before his due date, I had all sorts of pre-labor. I was in a lot of pain. It was around 4 o'clock in the morning on a Monday, and I was getting up and walking around, and it really just wasn't going away. And I talked to my husband and I said, this very well could be it. And they say with the second child, labor can go really quickly. Should I talk to them? Should I reach out? And our conclusion was, if I can go to sleep, it's not labor. So I tried very hard to go to sleep, and I did. And I never had any more contractions after that the rest of the week. And so when the following Monday came, the day after our Christmas party, I had those same sort of pre-labor symptoms around the 4 in the morning, in the exact same pattern, intensity, all of that. So I really didn't think much of it. I stood up, they were about the same, maybe subsided just a little bit, and I told myself again, if I can go to sleep, then this isn't labor. Well, after about an hour, I really felt a need to go to the bathroom. So this was around 5 o'clock in the morning. Now, my husband actually goes to work every day around 5 or 5:30, just depending on the day. And he had woken up around 4, and he knew sort of what was going on, but based on the previous week, he didn't really think much of it. He was downstairs writing, and I was upstairs in our bedroom. Now, when I went to the bathroom around 5 o'clock, I really felt the need to use the restroom. And I was trying, for lack of better terms, and just as I was sitting on the toilet, things started to get a little bit more intense. And I texted him because he was downstairs and I didn't want to wake up our daughter who was sleeping in her nursery. And I told him, hey, I think things are getting a little bit more intense. Maybe we should call the midwife, since they told us that things can escalate very, very quickly. And he sort of agreed, and we were going to talk about it after I got out of the bathroom. Well, as I'm sitting there, I have a very intense contraction, and that contraction, I felt a pop. And I didn't know it at the time, but my water had broken. And so then when I finished up and I went to wipe, I felt all of this extra fluid, and I was like, I'm pretty sure my water just broke. So I texted my husband and said, hey, my water broke. This is around 5 or 5:15. At that moment, he immediately got up. He texted his boss. He said at that point he had already kind of assumed that he wouldn't be going into work, and he started packing the car with all the suitcases and bags we needed for the birth center. I'm trying to get dressed and all of that, and of course I'm second guessing myself, wondering whether or not my water did break. I have had this happen twice where my water is broken and then it stops gushing fluid. So that happened with my first and it happened with my second. And as I was putting on my clothes, I thought, I probably didn't have my water break. I was trying to use the bathroom anyway. It was probably just that. So as I'm going back and forth with myself, wondering if I overreacted, I have another contraction and water gushes everywhere. And I then realize, oh, no, my water did break. And so I'm then looking for a pad because I haven't had a period in over 2 years because of breastfeeding and having been pregnant, and I cannot find any of my feminine products. All of my postpartum products are packed in the suitcase, and I am just walking around kind of like a crazy lady with a towel between her legs. So meanwhile, my husband's packing the car. He's texted his mom, and she's running, because they live close enough where they can run to our house, running on her way over to our house because she also knows things are going to escalate quickly. And I made it down the stairs, found some giant maxi pad, and we are getting ready in the car. I am standing in our living room having a contraction, and my husband goes, babe, what clothes do we need to pack? And then in his mind, he realizes that was a dumb question. And then he asks me again, sorry, what do we need? What else do we need to pack? In my mind, as I'm having a contraction, killed over there in pain, I just think he's asking me the same question over and over. So of course I yell, shut up, I'm having a contraction. Much meaner than that. And my mother-in-law walks in, right as that happens. She totally understands. She's super chill. And I finish the contraction. I tell him to not talk to me while I'm having a contraction. You have a brief, argument that we laugh over now since everyone was so stressed out. And then my mother-in-law asked me a question about our daughter, who at that point had just woken up, and I have another contraction. And at that point, I didn't realize it, but she said in her mind, based on the intensity, the way I was looking, she thought there is absolutely no way this woman is going to make it to the birth center. So anyway, we get in the car, and as we're driving out of our block, we call the midwife and say, hey, we're on our way. My water broke. And they're like, yeah, you should probably make your way down. If you feel the need to push, just give us a call, because it is a 2.5-hour drive to our birth center. We're in the car. We're making really good headway. I'm going to kind of tell on us and say that we were definitely speeding, because things were 6 minutes apart, lasting 1 minute. So definitely back-to-back contractions very quickly. Breathing through all of them. In between contractions, it was actually super smooth. Things were going really well. I wasn't in a whole lot of pain except when the contractions were happening. And then when I felt a contraction, my husband just knew to be quiet, and I would either say a Bible verse, I would think of something other than my present situation, like water flowing. I'd pray, anything to pass the time of that 1 minute, because I knew, hey, it's just 1 minute, I can deal with this. Much better than my first pregnancy. So we're driving, and we're about an hour and a half into our drive. So we only have about an hour left to go, and the GPS says you need to reroute, and it's having us do a U-turn on the highway because traffic is backed up so far. There was a wreck, and now we're being rerouted. And as we're being rerouted, we're following the GPS's new route, and I feel the need to push. And my husband looks over at me, because before I've been breathing through these contractions and relaxing and just laying back in the chair and just able to bear with it. As soon as that need to push happened, I was like groaning, and he could tell there was a difference. And he was like, "Is that the need to push?" And I said, "Yes." So we call the midwife. And as we're on the phone with her, she's asking a bunch of questions, and I have 2 more contractions, and they were just normal contractions. And I said, "Well, I might have been wrong. I don't feel the need to push anymore, and I've had 2 contractions since I've been on the phone with you." And she said, "Well, likely you're getting close, and your body's just trying to open it up for you. So just please make your way here as fast as possible. And if you feel the need to push again, call me." So as we're being rerouted, we're about to go onto a road, like a state route that runs right next to the highway. So you have the highway here, and then you have the state route, and what they were having us do is parallel the state route to bypass the traffic and get back onto the highway. So that's what we were doing. And as we're about to get on that road, I scream out and I say, "Why is this so hard?" I might have cursed too. And I had just gone through transition. And as soon as I screamed that, I felt 3 very powerful, intense pushes, one right after the other, no break in between. And I was like, I'm pushing. So we called the midwife, and I kid you not, we are starting this conversation with the midwife. This conversation lasts 17 minutes. Keep that in mind. We are an hour away from the birth center. We're making really good time. Probably, if we had continued the way we were going, we probably could have been there in 45 minutes. As we're on the phone with her, and I'm telling her I need to push again, she asks me if I can feel where the baby is. So I'm just not going to explain it, but he was about this far out. And she was like, "That's really good. Like, he is not going to come here for a while. You're good. You probably still can make it. Just keep driving as fast as you can. But worst case scenario, if he starts crowning, you let me know. Like, we need to pull over." I was like, okay. So I have another huge cluster of contractions, 3 right back to back, one more time. I feel again, he's this far. It's quite a bit of distance to move in one set of contractions. And she's still on the phone with us. She's asking us to try and not to push. Not that I have much control at that point. And I have 1 more contraction, and he's crowning. And of course, this whole time I'm like doubting myself, and I'm like, "I think he's crowning. I feel him." And I'm like, look, can you see?" And he's like, yeah. No. You're crowning for sure. So at that point, the midwife was like, "Okay, you need to pull off to the side of the road. We're going to deliver this baby." So we do. Fortunately, because we weren't directly on the highway, we were on the state route. There was a parking lot. And so we pulled into the parking lot, gravel parking lot, right under a Love's sign billboard. And the midwife asks me to face outside the door. And I'll just kind of show you with my body, because every time I try to explain it with words, it doesn't make sense. Car door, driver's seat, windshield, me, faced out this way. And she asked me to push, and I tried to push, and I was like, absolutely not. I pushed like that with my first, and I knew from experience I tore really, really badly with her, and I could feel myself tearing, and I was tearing up, and I was like, I can't do it. I would literally sit here for the rest of eternity before I'd push here, and it's not that I'd want to, I just know I couldn't force myself. The only thing that forced me to do it with my first was the fear of getting an episiotomy. With this, there was no fear of that because I knew no one was there to do it. So I had no motivation to do it. So I said, I really need to get into a different position. And at this point, we kind of stopped listening to the midwife because she really can't see what's going on. And I turn towards the driver's side of the car, and on all 4s, my leg up on the dash, and I'm pushing out my son. Which is kind of crazy. And so we're pushing, and I'm trying to work with my contractions, but what happens with me is when I'm having a baby, right when they're crowning, my contractions just stop. And I know that's pretty normal for a lot of people because it lets you kind of stretch out and being super TMI and not tear. But for me, they like literally just stop. I probably could be done essentially because I really have to work for it to get them out after that point. So with whatever tiny little bit of cramping I had left, I tried so hard, and I pushed him and pushed him. So this is his head. This is his little nose. He was down to here. Now, I didn't know any of this until later because I'm not looking, obviously. But from my husband's perspective, our son was like gray, and not moving or anything like that. I kept asking, "Hey, is he here?" Because the pressure had adjusted in such a way that I didn't quite feel like he was still there. Everyone's like, no, you need to keep pushing. So I'm pushing, and I get him right right under his nose. So he's just like barely his head's almost out. And at that point, the midwife asks what color he is. And my husband, who is very good in high stress situations, said, well, he's a little blue. From my perspective, I didn't realize anything was wrong. He was freaking out. Midwife was freaking out. I'm just chilling, not really realizing that this might be a serious situation because nobody wanted me to freak out because things could go wrong if I started freaking out. So the midwife has had him start feeling around to see if the umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck. And so my husband was feeling to see that. And when he realized it wasn't, and they communicated that with one another, then both my husband and the midwife were like, okay, we need to get this baby out. Now, mind you, it is 38 degrees in the middle of December, so he was also pretty cold. And so I'm pushing and pushing and pushing, and I am just getting nothing with this position on all fours facing the driver's seat. So the midwife kind of starts freaking out, and she's like, Julia, I need you to get on all fours and push this baby out. We're going to have him right here and right now. And I look and I'm like, but there's gravel on the ground because, I'm just in like nonchalant land. And my husband's like, no. He steps out of his shoes and he's like, squat. We'll deliver here. And so my husband, who had Crocs, he steps out of his Crocs. I step into his Crocs. I squat. I'm holding onto the door frame and push and push and push, and had like 3 sets of contractions, and his head came out. And I was like, oh, thank the Lord. He is delivered. And I was like, so is he out? Because I no longer felt him and his shoulders were stuck. Later, we found out his shoulders were a whole inch larger in diameter than his head, and so that's what it was. But boy, that took quite a bit. So with no contractions, with feeling no sensation whatsoever, I bared down as hard as I could per the midwife's request and pushed out the rest of my son from his shoulders down because he was stuck. And I can remember, like, after he was delivered, I said, is he here? And my husband was like, yes. And so I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? Because he was behind me. So I stepped over the umbilical cord, and when I looked, he is laying in my husband's arms, just not moving, completely gray. And looking back, it is horrifying to think of what I saw. At the time, I was so high on adrenaline that it didn't really faze me. I was just going through the motion of everything that was happening. He looked like he had died. Now, he was very cold because he had just been delivered into 38-degree weather. He was bruised from the head down because of how fast. He was born at 7:22, and my water broke at 5 o'clock. So he was delivered incredibly fast. And the pushing phase was 17 minutes. Remember, the phone call with the midwife was only 17 minutes long from when we called her saying I felt the need to push. So it was incredibly fast. So I asked my husband, is he okay? And my husband goes, yeah, he just needs to be warm. So I had fortunately worn a dress, and I sit down in the car and I pull off my dress and lay my son on my chest. He's still attached to me and everything. And we pile blankets and towels on me, and my midwife asks us to please rub his tummy, rub his back, rub his feet, try and get him to cry because he was not making any sort of sound or response. He immediately started gargling up some of the amniotic fluid. Apparently, this is what our midwife told us afterwards, when babies come out through the vaginal canal, they are pressed, the liquid in their lungs is pressed out. Now with my son, he didn't get that because he was born so quickly. And so he still had all that fluid like in his chest. So he had to gargle it out, which is one of the reasons he wasn't crying. So eventually he kind of started fussing. He never had a very strong baby cry during that drive to the birth center. He ended up nursing on the way. And then we had a very, very, very long drive to the birth center because we had an hour's left of driving. But now with a newborn who we had been strictly told not to put in a car seat, we were now driving on the highway with our hazards on very, very slowly. So it took quite a bit of time to get there. We arrive at the birth center at about 8:30 or 9, and they come out with these sheets because I have no clothes on. They take our son, they cut the umbilical cord. At that point, the placenta had been delivered in the car because at some point it just sort of came out while we were driving. It was about 30 minutes away from the birth center that it came out because I had been nursing him, and I just felt one more contraction. I actually was so worried that somebody had missed something and that I was going to have another baby. And anyway, it was just a placenta, just pushed right out. And then, so once we got there, they took him. At that point, he was screaming. So definitely was fine, brought us into the birth center room and kind of tried to pat us off. At that point, he was settled enough, and so I took a shower because I was covered in dried blood. Some of the things they don't tell you when you go and deliver, or when you have a unexpected delivery somewhere, there was dried blood everywhere. And my husband had to clean out the car with all the towels and all of the placenta parts, all of that. So it was quite the experience. And then it was funny because after I'd taken a shower, the requirements for the birth center is just that you can use the restroom, that you can take a shower, and that you sign all the papers, and then you can be let go. So almost as soon as we got there, they were like, well, you can leave whenever. And we're like, we're probably gonna stay. We kind of had a long drive. So that's our story. It was quite the experience. My mother-in-law then brought our daughter down, and we ended up staying overnight in a hotel because they have the newborn screening the next day. So we didn't necessarily want to go all the way back home. And it was just such a fun story. One of the crazy things is when my husband had taken off his shoes to have me step in them, I forgot to bring them back into the car. So randomly, somewhere in some parking lot is a pile of amniotic fluid and blood and one of my husband's Crocs. So I'm sure that people looked at that later, wondering what the heck had happened here. So that's something we like to laugh about every once in a while. It's just the fact that there's one of these random Crocs somewhere. But anyway, that is my story. I thought I would share it with you all, and I just really appreciate you all taking the time to listen. I hope that was kind of fun. But anyway, you all have great days. Thank you so much for watching my videos and subscribing. You all have great days, and thank you. Bye.